Okay, so good day. Uh, Today our topic that we are going to discuss is all about the environmental ethics. And so let's go on with the discussion. These are just some of the introductory parts of the report. So environmental ethics is moral philosophy concerning non-human nature. So ethics is practical reasoning. So as what explained that reasoning aims at actions. So on the other hand, environmental ethics is a practical philosophy. Environmental ethics concerns how humans, as moral agents, should best live their lives in their earthly home. So it includes the study of human beings, the study of the environment, and the study of the relationship between the two. And also, human beings cannot help, although that in environmental ethics, human beings cannot help using the modified tracks of the natural world. So, since humans depend on the nature for food, clothing, and shelter, for our water supply, and for the air we breathe. So, but the unintended impacts of human actions are now creating problems like global warming and the extinctions of multitudes of species. So problems which raise profound issues about how we should live our lives and organize our societies and which presents challenges that are never encountered by the previous generations. So environmental ethics actually involves words with various layers of meaning. So most of this using the word nature and environment. They are synonymously and equivocation common in the literature. And also there are actually three layers of nature as defined. So first is that nature, there's a sense in which artifacts of human makings are not considered part of nature. And the second is nature connotes everything in the universe apart from the supernaturals like gods and goddesses. Mm. And the third one is the Aristotelian connotation. So the nature, according to Aristotle, of nature of a thing is an innate essence that is disclosed if left to develop unimpeded. Living things then have natures that are manifested through biological process through use and death. Aristotle has a conceptions of a nature and development of living beings and in some sense of the universe so as a whole as he defined, which is called teleology. So this is the idea that by nature, all creators have an end or goal to realize. So which is the development and the full realization of their own nature. So, mm, so Aristotle has a holistic approach to life and to the universe in general. So when he studies in different forms of life, Aristotle considered them all together and emphasis what different forms of life have in common. So Aristotle also believed that all plants as well as the non-human animals and human beings, we tend to survive by nature to become fully developed and well-functioning creature. So the applications of categories such as the goodness shows non-human living being able or non-human living beings are valuable according to Aristotle precisely because we tend humans and non-human beings we tend to strive to achieve by our own goodness. So, so environmental ethics is one of the ethics is vital because the survival of life on Earth depends on it, and yes, I guess that this concludes the introductory part of the environmental ethics. Later on, my co-reporters will introduce some of the famous philosophers of environmental ethics. And these are the reference.
So my name is Jay Peregrino, and my assigned task is the one of the various approaches to environmental ethics. So Peter Singer and Tom Regan on the ethical treatment of animals. So Peter Singer's book Animal Liberation in 1975 is one of the most influential works with respect to philosophies which tackle the ethical treatment of animals. So Peter Singer is a rationalist philosopher in the Anglo-American tradition of utilitarianism. So Singer advocates equal treatment for all the sentient beings, from animals to human beings. So sentient means the ability to have feelings. He argues that in the same way that some people are prejudiced against other people that are different from them in terms of race, gender, or sexual orientation, they can also be accused to unjust prejudice against animals. He observes that human beings have been treating non-human animals in a radically different manner as they do human beings like themselves. So Singer names this behavior as speciesism, the unjustifiable privileging to one's own species over another. So, ang speciesism makita sa paagi sa atong pagtan-aw o pagtagad sa mga member of each species. So example, ang society nagtan-aw sa mga dogs as kanaang pinalagang animals, samtang while ang mga baka, baboy ug manok sa tibok kinabuhi nga pag-antos sa atong sistema sa pagkaon. So people often use the level of intelligence as a measure for discriminating against other animals, presenting them with a justification to treat animals merely as food, as any forms of means to an end. However, Singer argues that if we use this criterion, there is essentially no valid reason for us to kill the pigs for food or use chimpanzees for various medical experiments unless we include very young children for the same purposes. For it may be argued that they are less intelligent than adults chimpanzees. So if one argues against Singer and says that it is the potential for developing a higher form of intelligence that should be used as the criterion, it can still be argued that some young chimpanzees possess a higher potential for intelligence than some brain-damaged human beings. So, where then does one draw the line? What would be the moral criterion that can determine what sort of beings must be included in one's moral deliberations? It is immoral to step on grass. Should it be considered unethical to eat vegetables in the same way? The Singer seemed to be hinting at the fact that it is a specious way of thinking that we feel justified in consuming poultry and meat. Singer holds that it is being sentience or capacity to suffer that must serve as the base for including its interest in making moral choices. So if being cannot feel, then it has no interest, and therefore, to kick a dog is morally wrong, while crushing stone is not. Hence, If the being has the ability to suffer or feel pain, then its species must not get in the way of its being included in the moral sphere. All beings with the capacity to suffer equally should have an equal standing from a moral perspective. Here we see how Singer's doctrine is consistent with the utilitarian doctrine. The happiness of all beings that can feel pleasure and pain has equal weight in moral matters. Singer thus advocates vegetarianism and stands against animal experimentation because these practices tend to inflict suffering on non-human. In other words, if one's action causes painful consequences on sentient beings, both human and non-human, then Singer holds that this act is morally wrong. Now, let's proceed to Tom Regan. So, Tom Regan is a Kantian deontologist, has a different approach from Singer's utilitarian perspective. So, he holds that certain non-human animals have actual rights, which make them morally considerable, and oddly enough, it is not rationally that makes them so for him. So, for him, it is being an experiencing subject of a life that makes it count as morally considerable. So, if a being possesses these traits, then Regan says that such a subject of a life has inherent value and should be treated as a right holder. Hence, for instance, it is wrong to kill animals for sport, experiment on them or use them commercial agriculture once it is proven that they do experience themselves as a subject of a life. So more than anything, these two authors have shown that human beings should not wantonly exercise their dominion over the species. At the very least, humans must not consider the amount of pain they may be inflicting on other sentient being, no matter what the motivation. One must also try to see the other animals as beings of inherent value that deserve respect. In other words, if one is to be ethical in one's treatment of animals, one must continually come up with a ways of lessening their suffering or views them as beings that have inherent value and therefore deserve to be in the sphere of moral deliberation. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, in this video, I am going to discuss about the climate change and sustainable development. So, it is one of the subtopics for the environmental ethics. So, in the World Commission on Environment and Development came out Brundtland Report in 1987, it became clear that the vital planetary resources and the processes necessary to sustain life were under strain. So, according to research, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes climate change as one of the greatest challenges of the present time and expresses its concern on how the adverse impacts of climate change can undermine the mobility of countries to achieve sustainable development. So, the report raised a very important question. Is it equitable to sacrifice options for future well being in favor of supporting current lifestyles? So the report declares that it is not equitable for future generations to experience a considerable reductions of options for the sake of sustaining the needs and wants of the present. So before we dig deeper into this topic, I am your discussant in this video. My name is Trisha May P. Namelet. To continue my report, sustainable development means development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it is not only in the future of the future generation of human beings is at stake, but the existence of the very web of life or the biotic community. So which is the primary source of life for all. In other words, If one advocates the idea of sustainable development, then one must account for one's action with respect to the environment, not only in the context of its actual effects in the present, but perhaps more importantly, its potential harmful effects in the future. So, as most countries continue on this path of unmitigated production and consumption, it becomes clearer that humanity has become addicting to acquiring and consuming. The idea of enoughness becomes an alien concept. So when we say alien concept, it is something that it seems strange and perhaps frightening because it is not part of our normal experiences. So, as developed countries continue to use up most of the planet ecological capital with no regard for the welfare of the other developing nations, with a little access to such resources, the biological existence of the future human generation become threatened. So, by continuing such an ultra consumerist way of existing, humanity shooting itself in the foot as it were blindly pushing forwards without realizing that we are in auto-destruct mode. So a mechanism that can cause an object to destroy itself or render itself imparable after a predefined set of circumstances. So it is not only in the future of the future generation of human beings that is at stake, but the existence of the web of life or the biotic community, which is the primary source of life for all. Over the last century, the average surface temperature of the Earth has increased by about 1 degree Fahrenheit. An increase of 5 degrees would empty most of the planet's underground water reservoirs, which will cause the water to dry up under the ground. That will lead to um, the crabs to difficulty growing itself. So, as human beings continue to exist with such insatiability, the Earth's temperature has gone up. So, if we people continue to live with such careless actions, then it is only us who will suffer the consequences of our actions. So, if we're going to live without thinking about the welfare of our environment, then it is not impossible that our temperature will rise will only get higher as the day passes by. So in the polar region, for instance, average air temperature have increased by 5 degrees centigrade in the last 100 years. So as the temperature rises, extreme weather phenomenon has become an almost normal occurrence. So there is no more flooding or drought in the planet, and these have a dramatic impact not just in the lives of humans but in the entire ecosystem. So we should always put up in our mind that if we're going to live without thinking about our environment, then it is not only ourselves that we are destroying. It is the entire ecosystem, the plants, the animals, and all the living things that is present in this ecosystem. As the ocean gets warmer and the Arctic glacier melt, sea level rise, threatening coastal population. So experts have said that the 1.5 degrees centigrade average rise in global temperature may put 20% to 30% of species at risk of extinction. The Montreal Protocol and the Kyoto Protocol are international treaties that seek to decrease the emission of greenhouse gases that cause damage to ozone layer. So if our ozone layer will be damaged, then that will give us a lot of negative impacts to us humans. So climate change can also impact humans' health by worsening air and water quality, increasing the spread of certain diseases, and altering the frequency or intensity of extreme weather events. We should always remember that in our every actions that we made, uh, there's always a consequences. Either it is good or either it is bad. So if we're going to live with such insatiability, we must consider that We must consider the fact that it is not only our lives that we are destroying. There are any other living things that is present in this ecosystem that we must think of. So that would be all for my part, since the continuation of this topic will be um, presented and this will be discussed by my co-reporter. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Jessa BSEd, your last reporter for the topic environmental ethics. The objective is exhibit an understanding of what it means to be a dweller in nature. But before I will discuss my topic, let us first define environmental ethics. So what is environmental ethics? Environmental ethics studies the ethical relationship between a human person and a nature. And in environmental philosophy, environmental ethics is an established field of practical philosophy which reconstructs the essential types of argumentation that can be made for protecting natural entities and the sustainable use of natural resources. Now, let us know the view of Erasm Kuhak of the human being as a dweller. But before that, let us first know a short background of this philosopher Erasm Kuhak. So, Erasm Kuhak was a Czech philosopher and also a writer. His early education was in France. After communists took over Czechoslovakia in 1948, his family escaped to the United States. He died in February 2020 at the age of 86. So, the thinker Erasm Kuhak thinks it is the forgotten meaning of culture that is at the root of the human being's alienation from his or her environment. So when we say human alienation, it is the separation or estrangement of human beings from some essential aspect of their nature or from society. So it is often resulting in feelings of powerlessness or helplessness. Culture is not merely the collection of artifacts or the manifestation of people's taste and appreciation of beauty. And according to him, culture traces its etymological roots from the Latin word cultus, which means it is the yielding of respect, honoring the sacredness of all that is. So even if we have different culture, we have to respect others' culture also, and it is an honor because cultures of others is also a sacred. And according to as Kuhak definition of cultus or culture, giving respect of every culture is an honor and sacred. And as a human being, as a dweller, he defines to be a person of culture is to be someone who recognizes the nobility of. According to Erasm Kuhak, being a person of culture is someone who are having honor, dignity, integrity that recognizes the nobility of being or being good. So next we have culture is a human being's role in nature. So culture becomes the human being's role in nature because, as what Kuhak defines, culture is one of it is a yielding of respect, honoring the sacredness of all that is. So that's it. Culture becomes the human being's role in nature. So, and it involves the cultivation and the recognition of the value of all that exists. So, and a person must give value of all the things in her environment or of all the nature. So, and to be a person of culture is to be ethical. And to be a person of culture is to be ethical. So, considering that a person is good or doing the right thing, so having the ability to recognize, interpret, and act upon multiple principles and values, and give value to all the natural nature in his or her environment. So, the environment is the human being's only home. It is a complex system that allows one to explore his or her possibilities and sustain his or her needs even beyond the biological kind. So the environment is the human being's only home. And since we are living on Earth, we are responsible to take good care of our nature, to our environment, because if we did not take it responsibly, at the end we are the one who will suffer. So we must ensure that to take our part to keep our environment safe, clean, and protected. So like for example, so being a dweller or a person of culture, we have to take good care of our environment. Like for example, planting trees, using eco bags or instead of plastics. So and segregating our waste. So do not throw your waste everywhere. We have to take responsibly to our waste. People have lost sight of his or her essence as a dweller. Is the one who has been entrusted the responsibility not only of exploiting nature but of cultivating it in a way that is proportionate to its inherent worth. And culture has become a thing instead of an act. So people have lost sight of, people already forget what is her role, his or her role here in the earth. Instead of taking care of everything in the earth, we became the destroyer. So people become the most voracious consumers in all of nature. So example is craving for fast food, destroy natural habitat, test our medicines on obnoxious animals to cure our diseases, produce so much non-biodegradable, we till the soil without waiting for it to recover its lost minerals to produce more foods. So all of those doings destroy our nature, our environment. For example, the factories mostly destroy our nature. So culture has become a thing instead of an act. Human beings forget the rule of being a dweller in nature, and culture has become a thing instead of an act. Culture became a promise and never been acted. Culture is the person's ethical task in nature. It is the way one ought to dwell in nature, and lastly, and it is in fulfilling the demands of culture that one becomes a virtuous dweller. So, by the way, what does it mean to be a dweller in nature? So to dwell in nature begins with the acceptance of the fact that the earth is our home. So the earth is the only place in the known universe that allows us, our species, to live comfortably from the air we breathe to the food we eat and to the water we drink. So but the problem is we humans are lazy to change and to fix on our irresponsibly consumptive lifestyle. So some of the problems confront us today are the overpopulation, climate change, and pollution, and those are produced by us human beings. So it is by virtue of re-establishing the human being's essential nature as a dweller can one begin to find ways of becoming ethical towards nature. So, as dwellers in nature, we have to re-establish good things in our environment or her in environment. So, we have to give importance to our nature, as we humans are the one who benefits from it. And as a person of culture is to be a person of ethical. And from the view of Erasm Kuhak, he conceptualized he conceptualized the human being as a dweller because he believes that it is only by recalling and re-establishing our essential place in nature as dwellers can as initiate change in biotic community. So, the environment deserves respect because it is that which makes every other form of relationship possible. So, yeah. The environment deserves respect because this is our home. We humans and animals benefits most from the our nature. So nobody in his or her mind would devastate his or her home. So dwelling is therefore a way of life. So dwelling calls us to become what we truly stewards that are capable of subordinating greed to love and utility to responsibility. So dwellers Kuhak sends out a call for us to take our place as dwellers in nature. So, dwell implies that we treat the earth as our home. So, we take care of it and treat it with respect. So, but the problem is rarely do we care about the things so that we do not consider to be ours. We seldom participate with a full background knowledge of the cause we are advocating. So, we do it because our friends are doing it too, or we do it because it benefits us. So for most of us, we only start acting concerned about the environment whenever a crisis occurs that can damage our property. Is it right? So we must take good care of our environment. So that was all about the view of Irazim Kohak, and that would be all for my part. Thank you for listening. This is my reference. These are my references, sorry. Thank you for listening and have a good day.